Disclaimer, this story is rather old and I haven't used Carbogen since this experience, so if you use it, your experience may be entirely different. Unlike the Freon one I posted before, this is my own experience. Sit back and enjoy. This is by far the most nonsensical, yet interesting and craziest drug trip I have ever had. I had dabbled in hallucinogens before this, mainly psychedelics like 2CB, DMT, psilocybin mushrooms, and LSD, and I took a recreational DPH dose once and had tactile hallucinations where cockroaches were crawling inside of me under my skin and in my mouth. Yeah, never doing that again. I've also used other hallucinogens like ketamine, DOM, and PCP, only twice. So much crazy shit, let me tell you. Elves, talking machines, rainbow people, aliens, talking to people that aren't there, taking drugs that don't actually exist while tripping, feelings of intense physical and cognitive euphoria that are paradoxically mixed with horrifying visuals and spiritual introspections. But I have never had an experience as weird as this one. For those of you who don't know, Carbogen is a gaseous mixture consisting of 50-50, 90-10, or 70-30 carbon dioxide and oxygen, the second number being oxygen. Normally, inhaling pure carbon dioxide can straight up kill you, but when combined with oxygen, thereby eliminating the risk of death by a lack of oxygen, it's known to cause truly bizarre hallucinogenic and psychological effects. Not so much a high in the traditional sense, but rather an altered state of consciousness unlocked by your brain thinking you are dying. It all started when I was 16 years old on a clear day, when a friend of mine hit me up telling me he had bought a full tank of Carbogen from a local vendor who was also a chemist for 30 years, for only $150. His particular mixture consisted of 70-30 carbon dioxide and oxygen. Now, I had known the guy and had bought other drugs from him before with nothing but positive results, so I trusted him. At the time, I had no idea what Carbogen was, so I asked him. He told me it was an anxiogenic/dissociative mixture of oxygen and carbon dioxide that can cause psychedelic and even dissociative effects when inhaled directly from a mask, including hallucinations and other visuals that are either psychedelic in nature or fully solid like a deliriant, or both. He then told me that people have had some pretty epic experiences with Carbogen after inhaling a large amount from a bag or a mask in one sitting. I was always eager to try a new drug, so I immediately ran over to my friend's house, the friend who bought the tank. We'll call him B. He was 18 years old. 4 of my other friends were there, D, 17, C, 16, E, 23, and F, 20. We are a tightly knit group of young friends, so I felt comfortable trying an unfamiliar drug with them. I still talk to all of these people to this day. We would smoke together and occasionally snort some lines and dabble in other drugs, but this was an entirely new substance to us, and it was apparently non-addictive and non-toxic, which was definitely a plus. It was also an inhalant. The only other person I knew other than myself was a friend who used to huff Freon back in '04, but quit after a bad trip. He was E. I'd used Duster, but stopped after the first use because it gave me the worst headache known to the universe with a short-lived high that wasn't anything to write home about. Anyway, I opted to take the first hit, so B handed me the mask and told me to enjoy it. I took 3 breaths and immediately felt a rush of adrenaline. I was seeing minor visuals, mainly auras like what you see during the peak or onset of a migraine. I took 5 more hard hits, and this is when things got interesting. Everything around me seemed to slow down, like the frame rate of my eyes was dropping. I took 2 more hits and lost my balance. I fell backwards in slow motion, but I was unable to feel anything. Not just pain, but any physical sensation. This was the weirdest feeling ever, and I get chills down my spine thinking about the whole trip, even to this day. I promptly got back up, and my friends were looking at me. They were asking me questions, but I could barely hear anything. Everything was muffled, like they were trying to talk to me through a thick window. The sound I was surrounded with sounded like a large fan blowing. My friends were asking me questions like, "Are you there? Hello?" and "Can you hear us?" Still seeing auras and stars, I turned around, and on both sides of each wall, on the left and right sides, in the room, there were dancing figures in business suits. Their faces were completely black. I walked into the hallway leading to the back door of the house, and there was another dancing figure in front of the door, several in the kitchen on each side of the wall, as well as in the bedroom, 4 in total, 1 on each side of the walls, and 1 right underneath the fan. If I had to guess, I would say I was walking at approximately 1 to 2.5 kilometers per hour, or 0.6 to 1.5 miles per hour, but I felt like I was moving at about 100 kilometers per hour. This shit was insane. I walked back into the living room. This next part is the peak of the experience, and thus the hardest to explain, but I will try my best. While staring off, everything went black. I was floating in an unknown place with orbs of light flying everywhere around me. Deeper and deeper I drifted, then suddenly, a voice came on an intercom and said, "Warning, your life will repeat in 10, 9, whoosh." For whatever reason, I thought that it was one of the dancing figures talking me through the telephone. My life started to play from the beginning to end. I remembered things from my childhood. I saw visions of my family. I remembered that all the times I'd been a bad child, a good child, the rewards I received in my sports games, my birth, and when I got my first girlfriend. If I had to guess, I would theorize that this was my life flashing as my brain thought I was on the verge of death because of the carbon dioxide quantities and reacted accordingly. My hearing became metallic sounding and echoing. Suddenly, I was sure that I had died. It's strange how it worked. It was like my inner dialogue all of a sudden yelled, "Oh my God, you're dead, you've died." But the thought seemed beyond my control, almost as if it came from the drug rather than me. There's no way to describe this feeling. It was like I was dead and alive at the same time. I still don't know. Words can't do it justice. I then noticed small, independently colored dots in my field of vision, the movements of which corresponded to the rate and volume of the clicking and tingling sensation I felt when the dots seemed to touch me. The clicking is now turning into a seemingly patternized chant of cackling. I then had a vision of myself in the hospital room when I was getting my broken arm fixed after I suffered a nasty fall while skating at the skate park. There were butterflies flying around. I then had a vision of myself sitting on my porch talking to my older sister a few months before she left for college. There were also butterflies flying around, and the cars that drove by looked blocky and low definition. Then, I felt something that was quite scary, and although I remember telling myself that it was completely irrational to be scared of it, I couldn't shake the feeling. It was the feeling that behind me there was a huge swirling vortex or black hole that was coming closer and closer, about to suck me in. I looked behind me and saw just that, a black hole that was sucking everything and everyone in, right where the door would normally be. I tried to escape, but couldn't. I was being sucked into this portal of absolute nothingness. I continued to fall through this dark abyss of nothingness until, boom, I opened my eyes and my hands were in front of my face. Everything was red, my vision was extremely sharp, and there was this loud ringing like a dead dial tone in my head. I was lying on the floor, about a meter from my friends, and they just stared at me, confused. The ringing sound was slowly wearing off, but the other effects were still in action. I was slightly delirious and had a very mild headache. The dial tone faded out, everything became clear. I took a deep breath and realized that I was still here. I gathered myself up and got to my feet. Although my knees were weak, I walked over to the couch and looked at my friends. I looked at Dee and said, "Holy shit, that was a heroic dose if I have ever taken one." I then told them I wanted to take a break. They were good friends and understood. My friend C noticed unease and told me to relax. I was uncomfortable and a little paranoid for a while, but really that was it. My friend C didn't have the same experience. He just said he was in an unusually paranoid state for a few minutes. B then took 2 huffs, D took 3, E took 1, and F took 3. The only other time I've ever had an experience that was even remotely similar to this was when I took Special K. Even though it was an intramuscular injection with bioavailability of 93 to 95%, the experience with that pales in comparison in regards to its hallucinogenic effects, although ketamine was more euphoric. That, along with its relatively low toxicity, makes ketamine my dissociative of choice, and I still do it occasionally to this day. I did have a trip on PCP a year after this story that had similar solid visuals, but it didn't elicit the same mental state and feelings that Carbogen did, so that also pales into comparison. About an hour later, I felt better and grabbed a blunt. I told them the whole experience. They were amazed, and Dee said that he saw minor visuals, but didn't see anything that crazy. I never would have thought that such an intense experience could be produced by something as simple as combining oxygen with carbon dioxide. It's one thing to simply have an intense trip, but to have that be your first impression of this drug, well, it really sets your bar high. I have no idea how long the trip lasted, but I don't think it was any more than 3 minutes. Jesus H. Christ, this shit is insane.